I've come out of the mindset that life is hard and that when you learn how to play with life, when you understand that everything in your life is literally just a reflection of you, it's removed a lot of that mentality that like life is hard or things are just harder for me. It's like, okay, I just have a different experience, I have different lessons, I have different tools, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily harder. I probably just have to play by different rules. I probably have to break a few rules here, I have to bend a few rules here.
So, shall we go back to the very beginning and talk about how you grew up?
Oh, we can go back all the way to the beginning. How I grew up. I'd say I grew up shy, very curious as to why people did what they did, and kind of curious, but like also hesitant about the world. Yeah.
Do you have siblings?
I have three siblings, yeah.
And what order are you in the family?
Between my biological parents, I'm an only child. And then because my parents got divorced when I was younger, with on my mom's side, I am the older sister to my younger brother. And then on my dad's side, I am the middle child between my older and younger sister.
Got it. So, your dad was married before met your
No,
mum.
no.
Oh, he just
So
had a
my
child before.
my older sister is my stepmom's daughter, and then my younger sister's their child.
Got it. Okay. How old were you when your parents split up?
I was I was about five or six. Yeah, I'd say five or six. Because I mean, again, I was a kid. It was just a lot going on. Timeline isn't that great, but I would say five or six. Yeah,
And this is in Pretoria.
yeah, in Pretoria.
And then you went to live with your mum.
Yeah. So after my parents divorced, I was mainly staying with my mom, and then I would visit my dad like every second weekend. And then he was also close by, but yeah, I think they just decided it would be more stable for me to have like one primary household, which was my mom's at the time, and then I would visit my dad's on the weekends at his place as well.
And how long after did your mum remarry?
Oh. So I would say both my parents met their partners, their secondary, I don't know, their after partners. Probably like really young. I was really, really young. Could have been the following year after, so now when I was six. And then my younger brother came when I was seven, and then my younger sister came when I was eight. So yeah, pretty fairly recently. But neither of them were married at the time. My dad and my stepmom got married. I can't even, I can't actually remember when, but my mom never married my stepdad.
And did you get on with your stepdad?
Yes and no. I had an interesting relationship with him because I could tell that he was a good person, but I just didn't click with him. And I always had that cognitive dissonance as to understanding that this guy is a good guy and people telling me that, he's a good guy, but I couldn't click with him for some reason. I didn't always feel very comfortable with him. There was also a little bit of animosity from his family, like his mom and some of his siblings. So I don't think that helped. Um, so yeah, like it was always interesting navigating that. And I think as a child, I was a little bit too self-aware because I could tell that my mom was really happy with him. I could tell that this man was a good man, but I just couldn't understand why I couldn't connect with him. So I didn't have the self awareness to understand that, but just to understand that like my mom's happy with him, so I'll kind of put up with him for her. So yeah, it was interesting.
And how did you cope with the divorce and like households changing?
Oh, not very well. I think there was a lot of again, I think that's when my question of like, why do people do what they do started? Because I was trying so desperately to understand why my parents divorced. And I guess as a child who also has a very limited understanding of the world, you also think it's your fault. So I was like, okay, why did they divorce? And what did I do wrong? Or is it my fault? Is there something wrong with me that led to them divorcing? And then when my step parents came into the picture, it was also weird because I understood that, like, okay, these people are my parents, but not really, but they are. And then trying to build a relationship with them, then trying to build a relationship with my older sister as well, but being like, I don't know if I like you yet. Because I guess, again, as kids, you're just at that phase where you're just looking at other kids as like, I don't know if I like you. So I'll figure it out. Um, Also just dealing with sometimes just again just this sharing. I think that was a big thing, just like with my older sister, sharing certain spaces, sharing toys, sharing my parents. I think that was also a big thing when my younger siblings came into the picture. Was like, oh, I actually have to share my parents now, and that was a terrible feeling because, again, apart from understanding that a younger sibling tends to need more things because they're literally an infant, they can't do anything for themselves. But coming into this place where it felt, again, just coming from feeling that there was something wrong with me, and now looking at my siblings and like, oh, do you love my siblings more than me? So it was tough, and I kept a lot of it to myself. I did my best for my parents. Yeah, it was interesting. I feel like I grew up a lot faster than most kids would, just because I had to make sense of the situation as quickly as I could, and I wasn't a child who threw like tantrums or just made a scene. I would just like I just told myself that if I'm a good girl, my parents will love me, my parents will accept me, things will be good. So just be a good girl. So again, that means just I think giving up some of my needs, really.
Huh. So what kinds of things?
So again, just like understanding sometimes when I wanted attention from my parents to sometimes give that up because again, maybe my younger sibling needed more attention or my parents were spending time with their partners. There were times I remember with my older sister, like we had to share a single bed. And again, I was still getting used to like sharing a space with someone I didn't know. And it was so intimate at the same time. So sometimes I'd literally just wake up in the middle of the night and I'd go sleep on the couch and I'm like, she can sleep there. And it wasn't spiteful. I think it was just a thing of like, you have the bed, I'll go sleep on the couch because at least I'll have my own space. Um, I think sometimes not verbalizing when things upset me and just sitting with that by myself. Again, I think especially the attention, because I spent a lot of time by myself. My dad would sometimes walk into my room, are you like, okay? And I didn't know how to tell him that I wasn't. So I was just like, yeah, I'm fine. And yeah, just doing a lot of that.
Oh my God, this is so sad for that small little child. Um,
Yeah, it's weird sometimes when I think about it.
it's funny because I had the same thing that I thought there was something wrong with me, or like I
Mm,
was, but not to do with divorce, to do with another sibling getting sick. So then I lost all the attention. But
mm,
how I dealt with it was very different. It was like the opposite of yours. I then became like throwing tantrum, doing what I could to get attention, but in a negative
yes.
sense. But then that reinforced the belief that I am like bad or whatever because I was behaving badly.
Yeah, and I guess doing a lot of that, you probably got like reprimanded and shouted at. So yeah, I can understand it reinforcing that belief even further.
Yeah. But I mean, either way, either of those things can obviously not serve you well in the future, which is, yeah, I think,
Oh,
yeah. So do you remember being conscious of this stuff at the time, or it's like later through therapy or doing the inner work or whatever these things came back to the surface?
I think some of it was conscious because I even just like now as I'm speaking to you, I do remember times like really vividly, just like doing certain actions, but then sometimes a lot of it also came up in just doing the inner work and working on myself and be like, oh, I did that. Oh, that's why I did that. Oh, like just so much insight. And it's like, so it was a mix because I think at some point I shut down so much of that. And when I remember like just becoming aware of it, it was so painful because I was like, why did I do that to myself? But I also understand why I did it.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
yeah,
and how was school for you?
school was fine. School was great. School was my favorite thing in many ways. I think because I got to go to my friends where there was a lot more love, attention. I think at the time I didn't even understand that like having divorced parents was an odd thing. I think I only became aware of that like in grade 4. And I was talking to another kid whose parents were divorced. And I was like, oh my gosh, I actually don't know anyone else who has divorced parents. What do you mean this is like not a norm? Um, but like school was great. I really did love school. I thrived in school. I think I also used school to get the attention from my parents because I believe that if I got really good grades, if I did well in sports and extracurriculars, they'd see that like, oh yeah, I'm worthy of their love, I'm worthy of their attention. And so it was, yeah, it was for myself, but also for the love and appreciation that I wanted.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of expectations did your parents have on you?
My dad, his expectations weren't explicit, but his was just like, I just want you to do well at school. My mom's also wasn't explicit, but I think the times when I felt that she paid attention to me was when I got really high marks or I got a certificate or I just did something really well. I think I picked up on that so much. So in my head, I just created the story of like, you have to get really good marks. So mom can pay attention to you at least. I think at the time it was more important for me to get attention from my mom in terms of school than my dad, just because I saw more of her reaction and response to me doing well in school than my dad. So it was like, get good grades and you'll get mom's attention.
Huh. Yeah, that's funny. I had the same thing. Working out,
It really works that way. Like, ugh.
what's the quickest way to get attention? Yeah. Um, okay. And then, so what was your path after school? Like, how did you work out what you wanted to do?
I don't know, actually. I just I know in grade 9 because that's when in the South African education system you pick certain subjects that you'll be taking from grade 12 to matric, grade 12, what? Grade 10 to 12. And essentially those are just the subjects you'd be studying further that will then help you get into uni. So I just knew for myself I really enjoyed biology. So that was one of the subjects I'd taken, and I was really into sports, into like fitness. So I thought, okay, maybe I could do something in that realm. Maybe it was like physiotherapy or something. I didn't know a lot about what I was going to do, but I was really interested in psychology. And even though like we don't do it in high school in any shape or form, I was like probably going to become a psychologist. And a lot of people like to say that because my mom's a clinical psychologist. So like, oh yeah, your mom definitely influenced you in becoming a psychologist. And I'm like, yes and no, because she's a clinical psychologist. I don't really want to work with people who have mental health disorders. I think there are better people who are equipped for that. But I thought like I could maybe work with athletes, so maybe doing sports psychology. And I don't know, I think for me, it was just it made more sense because it was like, if I study psychology, it will help me answer the question as to why people do the things that they do, whether it's through behavioral psychology or cognitive psychology. I would just get to answer that question. So, yeah, I was thinking a lot about psychology or just something in the physical realm, I guess.
And do you remember when you first became interested in why people do the things they do?
Yeah, I think it was just when I was younger and just trying to figure out like why my parents divorced, and then picking up on different things people would also do in general. I was like, oh, why did they do that? Or why? Yeah, it was always questioning a lot of human behavior and decision making and cognitive processes. Um, and then I think as I got older, the questions got a little bit more quote unquote sophisticated. Because then I would apply it in a lot of the time in like English, in English classes when we're reading about a certain character. It's like, I wonder why that character did that. Oh, because of XYZ. Oh, and just always piecing that and creating some kind of a narrative for myself that way.
Huh. And do you feel like you ever got the answer about your parents?
I did, and it took such a long time to get to the answer, and it was hard to understand that it was not me. And I think it was just because I told myself the story that it was me for so long that I was like, no, that's not right. Like it has to be because of me. And to find out that it wasn't, it was such a break in like my paradigm and my beliefs. Um, but yeah, it was just interesting, and I think I also learned a lot more about my family that way, and just like also about relationships and how like marrying into a family, it's not just you and your partner, it really is you and your partner's family and your partner's family, and just that entire dynamic that has to come together.
Huh. And is that part of the reason it didn't work?
Yeah.
Are they both South African from
Yes,
Pretoria?
both South African, both from Pretoria.
And what kind of values did they instill in you growing up?
Oh, that's a great question. I think one value they really instilled in me was to respect other people, despite of like, especially because in South Africa, I think it's with its history, just like race and the historical history of like apartheid and so forth. It was like just respect people because they're a human being, not because of their race, not because of their ethnicity. I would also say they instilled, I mean, they didn't actually instill it in me directly, but them constantly pointing it out instilled it in me, like discipline. I think I was a very, very disciplined child, and also just seeing how my parents would react to me being disciplined, I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is a good value. Like, have a routine, be disciplined, stick to XYZ. Um, I would say with my dad, I would say punctuality, and also my mom punctuality, but she's not punctual. So she instilled it in me just because I was always getting frustrated with her not being on time. So I said I have to be on time for stuff.
And what was Pretoria like when you were growing up there?
Pretoria was, it felt smaller. Um, I think because in the area that I had grown up in, I knew my neighbors. My grandfather's shop was literally like where we were staying. So I was interacting with people all the time. So it felt so small because I feel like I knew everyone, but it was also always familiar faces. And then when my parents divorced and my mom and I moved out of my grandfather's shop because it was upstairs, like the apartment that we stayed in was upstairs, so just above the shop. And then we moved in with my grandparents in another part of Pretoria. I realized like how big the world is. And it was just interesting because just the environment changed so much. Like I didn't know my neighbors as much. The yard and just the space I had was so much bigger. And then also when I would visit my dad, even though we were staying in like a complex, I noticed that people just kept to themselves. So things felt smaller, but also bigger at the same time.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And did do you feel like apartheid still like casting a shadow over things?
I would say so because at least in the area where I grew up, it's a black area, dominantly a black area. And then to when I moved to my grandparents' house, that was a more white area. And that's also why the yard and also the house was so much bigger than where I grew up. And yeah, it definitely was. It wasn't a culture shock in the sense of like almost seeing like more white people because I'd always seen white people. I have my god sister's white. I have white friends, so it wasn't like this big. But just seeing how things changed from moving kind of from a township to a more suburban area.
Hmm. And what about the school you went to?
So the school I went to, the first school I went to, my primary school, I just thrived there. I loved my primary school, at least up until grade three, because that's when I then moved to a different school in grade four. I thrived there. I was Miss Goody Two Shoes. I was the teacher's pet, and I loved being the teacher's pet. Like everyone, I wouldn't say they hated me because kids are kids, but it was definitely like, oh my gosh, her again, her. And I was like, yes, it's me. And I got another star on my card. Did you get another star? No, you didn't. And it was so funny because even the people I knew who didn't like me, I would still sit with them during like break and we'd have such a great time. So it was like, okay, it's just in the classroom that we're maybe not super friendly. And then when I moved to the second primary school from grade four to seven, that's when things started feeling a little bit more competitive, even though it was a smaller class, probably because it was a smaller class. And I just felt like everyone was super smart. So like the bar was just like raised. And it was interesting. I think that's when I started becoming really competitive in school and but also still having fun with it. Like it was a fun competition.
Hmm. Okay, and then you went to Cape Town to study after
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, so that was for after school studied at UCT. And yeah, that was also UCT was an interesting experience also for culture because I think compared to like my high school and my primary school where I had interacted with other kids of different races as well, it didn't feel so segregated. But going to uni, that's definitely when I saw a lot of segregation happening. There was also international students, so that also was interesting to just meet people and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm from this place." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, there's people not from South Africa." Like it was
Where
so weird.
where were
Um,
most of the international students from?
the international students that I met the most were from Zimbabwe, Malawi, Nigeria. There were two girls I remember meeting who were from the UK. Yeah. So it was just interesting just meeting new people. And I think a lot of them who maybe didn't even grow up in South Africa or even do secondary schooling in South Africa, a lot of the conversations again about race or just the history was so new to them. And I think even just the conversation in general, just as a South African as well, for me, about race and just discrimination was so interesting to have. Because again, I wasn't having these conversations in high school, but it's not to say that I was oblivious of what was happening. It's just we weren't talking about it. It was just like, yeah,
Huh. Okay, it was kind of like you knew the history, but it wasn't as much of a focus in the present.
yes, yeah.
But when you went to uni, it was like very
Oh,
much.
it was like front and center. And I think not even just race as a form of discrimination or prejudice, but even class. I remember class was also a very big conversation that happened because, again, in high school, primary school, even preschool, I, in a way, I thought everyone could just afford schooling. Like, it's not the American schooling system, from what I understand, that like everyone has to go to school or something. It was like everyone could afford schooling. And going to university was the first time I was literally meeting people who were being supported by like bursaries or scholarships. Some people couldn't come back the following year because of financial issues. And it was so interesting to me because, again, I just didn't know that people were struggling in that way.
Huh. So your parents were supporting you at that point.
Yeah.
Got it. And so you would have been from like a well off background, but you didn't necessarily realize.
Yeah, I would definitely say like middle class, if not maybe even upper middle class.
Uh-huh. So then did
Yeah.
that make you change your mind about how you viewed things in South Africa?
I mean, definitely. I think it just not changed so much, but just broadened my perspective. Because I think even again, staying in um like where I grew up, where it was technically a more impoverished area. I think because again, I had my grandfather who was literally running a shop and my parents were also working. I never felt that a lot of financial struggle, at least with my basic needs. I know that sometimes with certain wants, like, okay, we can't afford this right now, but that was like normal. I was like, yeah, we can't afford everything. But definitely just seeing some of other people's basic needs and seeing them struggle to get that, it was definitely just um yeah, just a big perspective shift.
Mm-hmm. And did it change your mind or broaden your perspective, I guess, about how you thought about race?
Yeah, yeah, it did.
In what way?
I think especially just moving to specifically Cape Town, I'm not going to speak for like the entire province of the Western Cape, but just Cape Town. A lot of things were really expensive, and seeing that a lot, also just like its tourism market is so, it's like it's really big in Cape Town, and it's a lot of foreigners. So even those prices affect the locals, and more so, a lot of white people were able to afford a lot of those prices, but a lot of black people and colored people were struggling, and it was affecting their standard of living because so much of the city was kind of catered to a lot of higher income earning people compared to like a more like not even middle class, but just something average that a lot more people can afford.
Huh. So a lot more inequality, basically, than
Yeah,
what you ever witnessed.
yeah.
And then how was your experience at uni?
My experience at uni was terrible, but also the best experience I could have asked for. My first year was it was I think the first time really struggled making friends because again, moving from preschool to like primary school to high school, like you kind of easily make friends as being in the same space with people for so long. But with uni, people are moving like all the time. So to actually go into spaces where you'll see people regularly and you can form relationships, I was like, oh, this is what adulting is like. Fun. So I experienced like loneliness, and just learning how to actually connect with people and form relationships. And then I made some like amazing friends that I'm still friends with today. So I'm super grateful for that. My anxiety flared up a lot in that first year. I started experiencing panic attacks for the first time. It was terrible. I ended up missing, I think, two exams because I literally had a panic attack before, like just before the exam. So I couldn't physically even get myself to the venue to write those exams. It was also the first time I had to start seeing a psychologist. Um, and that's also when I just became aware of more things. Second year, probably the worst year of my life at this point. And then 2022, my final year was a lot better. I felt that I had a lot more control, a better understanding of how uni works, what I wanted to do studying. So, yeah, it was a lot better and I enjoyed my time a lot more.
So what happened in your second year?
Second year was when I had my first heartbreak. I broke up with my first partner, and that was just heartbreaking. Like it was in the beginning of the year. So I was going through that and I realized how much I was really dependent on that relationship. Um, just because we started dating in high school and then they moved away to New Zealand. So we were doing long distance. And then I guess in 2019, sorry, it just, because we didn't really have much of an end plan. We weren't sure if it was a thing of I was going to move to New Zealand, if they were going to come back, but they couldn't because they needed to get residency. So there wasn't really an option for them to come back. But I also wasn't ready to leave and go to a different country. So we ended up breaking up, and it was just like devastating to me. It was like my first heartbreak. A lot of my self-worth, my self-esteem, I just went down. I just went down the drain. My mental health went down. So in my mental health going down, my depression and my anxiety spiked. I started engaging in like a lot of drinking and just drugs and going out to just numb that pain. But in investing my time in those things, I was investing less time in my studies and even in some of my healthier friendships. So was not a great time almost from like every single aspect. I wasn't going to the gym, which over the years I've learned is such a big, like my physical health is so intertwined with my mental health. So in not going to the gym, my mental health took a harder hit. And I ended up failing two really important courses that I then had to repeat in 2020. And also, it was just like this weird thing of really having failed at something so big for the first time in my life and having to tell my parents that and thinking of the financial implications of that, thinking just how they would see me and all those insecurities. It was just a mess year.
Was the university supportive?
Yes and no. Because they do have mental health facilities, but unless you kind of go to them first, you're not really going to get the help you need. And yeah, it's just hard again, just from the perspective of having never reached such a low point in my life where I actually noticed that my mental health was suffering. I didn't know how to even like reach out and say, "Oh, I think something's wrong." Um, yeah, and I think I was just in a place of trying to numb things that I wasn't even focused on something potentially really being wrong.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm just thinking initially for the first panic attacks and missing exams, was that like you were able to say there's a medical reason or whatever, and then you could reset them?
Yeah. Yeah. So with the first panic attacks, I remember I called my mom and I told her what happened. And I also asked my friends at the time and they said go to like one of the student psychologists. They can write it off, saying again it was like a medical mental health situation, and for that you can then rewrite the exam, or they'll just give you like a duly performed certificate. So just saying that you passed, even if you didn't write the exam based on your term and like year mark. But then in this second year, I just didn't make use of those of those facilities until just I was supposed to leave for a holiday with my family, and I had to go to the course head and say I'm going to be missing two really big exams, or not even exams, they were just tests, and just trying to create some kind of a solution with the course head. And he said, okay, well, these are really important tests that you can't just miss, you can't rewrite them either, so we're not going to fail you, but we're just going to say that you didn't perform well, so you're essentially just going to have to repeat the courses anyway. So yeah, not a lot of support. And I think I didn't know how to even go to the like maybe the student psychologist and say, oh, this is happening, because I was functioning relatively well. It wasn't that I was really stuck in bed or not eating. So I think I really, from that perspective, didn't think anything was wrong just because I was essentially like a high functioning depressed person.
Huh. And so when you were drinking and doing drugs, was that kind of with friends in like a partying sense? So no one could, so it kind of looked like normal on the outside.
Yeah, yeah. It was either like a party or just a small get together, like outside on the yards or at someone else's apartment who was living off campus. Yeah. So again, everyone's doing this. Some people are still managing to get their schoolwork done and all of that. So it didn't look terribly out of the norm for anyone, I would say.
Mm. And were you able to talk to your family or your friends about how you were feeling?
Um, I didn't really speak to my family about it, just probably telling them. I actually didn't tell my family anything. I just told them like, yeah, no, school's going fine, even though it's terrible. I was like, I'm doing fine, even though I was doing terrible. My friends, I did speak to, um, just telling them like, I wasn't okay. But I think with schooling, that was the one thing I didn't really speak to them about. It would sometimes be like, oh, let's go study. And I'm like, oh, I'll come with you guys. And then maybe not end up going and just say like, oh, I'm tired. Or even if I do go, not being able to get anything done because I just couldn't focus. So again, just like a lot of high functioning that unless I said it to people that I really wasn't okay, I don't think that they would have picked up on that, like something's wrong.
Huh, got it. So you were just like going out a lot to avoid studying.
Yeah.
Was it fun at all?
I did. I did have a good time. I think in the times when I used it to also connect with people, it was really good. And I had, like, again, just had a fun time. But I know there were definitely times when I was just there because I didn't want to feel anything. I just, I guess I had the added benefit that there were other people, so not too much attention would actually be drawn to me compared to if maybe I was with like two other people or even a one-on-one.
Mm. And what kind of drugs?
Just weed, just weed and tobacco, really.
Uh-huh. And then what was kind of the turning point?
The turning point was the end of the year when I realized that I had failed and I would have to repeat, and just coming back home and having to tell my parents that I had failed the year.
What was their reaction?
They were really supportive. Again, I didn't tell them what had caused it. I did tell them that I'd actually been struggling a lot with my mental health, but I didn't tell them about the going out, the weed, the drinking. Just told them like I was just struggling a lot, and they were really supportive. And they said like it's fine, you can repeat. It's not the end of the world. And I was struggling to also accept that from them because I really told myself like they would be so disappointed. They would really think I'm a failure. How could they possibly support me when I failed them? And again, that was just my narrative. It wasn't their narrative at all.
Huh. So, but then did you really still feel yourself like that you're a failure?
Yeah. I think for that whole, because I came back home in November, just that whole November, December, that yeah, just that period. It was really hard. I avoided my parents so much just because I couldn't deal with how I was feeling around them, even though again they were so supportive. It was just like, no, you should be disappointed in me. I am a failure. Again, they weren't saying this, but I just felt like that so deeply.
And what were you doing in that time?
A lot of it was just keeping to myself. I would say the November, early December period, and then I remember after Christmas, I picked up I picked up a novel. I forgot the name of the novel right now, and then I also picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I read that. And something about reading that, and I remember I was sitting like in front of the fireplace. It just made things feel a little bit better. it gave me hope that like, yeah, you can turn the situation around. And I really love that. And then going into 2020, I also read Atomic Habits. And that was like the first time I was like, oh my gosh, I can really change. I can actually make things better. So yeah, that's what I was doing. So just keeping to myself and then having those two books kind of saved me towards the end of the year.
Had you been interested much in money before you read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Yes and no. So I was interested, I always liked money as a kid, just because it's not that my parents didn't talk about money or they did talk about money, but it wasn't a taboo topic in the household. And my parents weren't extremely stingy with money. Like sometimes if I asked like, "Oh, can I have money for Friday to go buy at the tuck shop?" They would give me money to go buy at the tuck shop. Also, just again, with my grandfather at owning his own shop, like I was quite familiar with money, like helping customers, giving them their change, bringing money to him when he was putting it in the safe. So I was interested in it from that perspective. I even like made my own paper money. I was like, I'm rich. But then in yeah, then when what? Then when my partner had moved away to New Zealand, it became a little bit more serious. I think that was the first time it really became serious of like saving money and making money somehow because I was like, if I make enough money, I can get a flight to go see them. So I was like, cool. Then I was like, oh, I have to get a job. And just because my first year schedule was just so hectic, I really didn't have the time to actually go to the job. And also being in a new area in Cape Town, I didn't feel comfortable at all, like navigating and traveling to places. So it was there, but there wasn't a lot of action. And I think when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it just gave me a new perspective that like I don't have to make money through a job. And that's when I also just got introduced to entrepreneurship. And I was like, oh my gosh, my grandfather's literally a business owner. He's an entrepreneur. And that was the first time I really just started seeing like there's a different way of making money more so.
Mm-hmm. What kind of shop does he have?
Just a brick and mortar shop, like a grocery shop, but also a butchery. And then on the other side of the shop, he would do like mechanics and helping, yeah, just fixing like certain things for people.
Amazing. And then, so how did you, so I guess you went back to uni at the start of 2020?
Yeah, so went back, and at this point, I was like, I'm coming back stronger than ever, whatever. And then COVID hit, and I was like, oh, okay, I think my plans, yeah, but everyone like I think everyone's plans. But it was also in the beginning of 2020 when I started thinking like, okay, how can I make money online? So it wasn't so much about like how can I make it through a job or like what job should I get. It was like how can I make money online? And that's when I discovered social media marketing or building a social media marketing agency. And I bootlegged a course from who was it from? It could have been Sam Owens or someone else. And then when COVID hit and had to come back home and still do online schooling, in the time that I wasn't doing like school, I would then be studying that course and trying to build my agency.
Huh. So you went back to uni being like, okay, now I'm going to be serious about it and
Yeah.
make sure I pass and everything. Wow. And how did your friends react?
My friends were really supportive. They were just happy that like I'd essentially come out of that dark place and I was willing to actually be better. I did tell them like, for instance, because I know that I still smoked um like Rollies tobacco for a while after that, but I was like, yeah, I'm not drinking, I'm not doing weed unless I don't know, maybe it's some like kind of casually. But it was like I'm definitely just working myself. I was so serious about going back to the gym. Um, so it was just a lot better, and they were really supportive and just happy to see me in a better place.
And then did that anxiety calm down as well?
Yeah, it came down a lot. The depression also came down a lot. And I think just the conversations I'd had with specifically my mom after 2019 helped a lot. And just also getting a psychologist for a bit helped a lot.
And then, okay, so 2020, you had to go back home and was studying
Yeah,
online. And how did the business go that you built?
it didn't go great. It didn't go great at all because so much of it was so new. I think understanding how to actually reach out to people, having to position myself. I didn't even know how I was supposed to help these people. I was literally just following like what my mentor was saying, like word for word, and saying like, yeah, okay, I'll do this. I spent a lot of time just collecting leads. I wasn't even reaching out to them or anything. I was just creating this long list of people I would reach out to, but I never reached out to them. I was focusing on like, oh yeah, I should build a website, like all the things you shouldn't do when you're first building a business. I did. And it made me feel busy, but I obviously wasn't being productive. So for 2020, it wasn't going anywhere. Um, yeah, but I thought it was, but it wasn't.
What was the idea for the business?
So for that business, the idea was to build a social media marketing agency that would be helping gyms and fitness business owners grow their businesses by getting more leads with Facebook ads.
Huh. So how does that work? You would just offer to make the ads for them and then
Yeah, so
they,
I would offer to run the campaign for them and then collect leads and then send it through to them for them to contact and actually get people to show up to their gym or to their fitness studio.
got it. And where did that idea come from?
Literally just from my mentor. He just gave like certain industries that you could reach out to, and I was like, okay, I don't like dentists. I don't know what realtors do. I have no idea what construction companies do, so that's just going to be odd. I was like, I like gyms. I like business. I know how a gym more or less works. I can do that for them.
And how did you meet your mentor?
Just online. I think just that constant Googling of like how to make money online and then some of his videos on YouTube coming up. And I was like, oh, I like what this guy's saying. And then I'd just watch a whole bunch of his YouTube videos. I couldn't afford his course at the time. So I literally just scraped. I genuinely feel like I scraped the internet looking for somewhere I could buy it for cheap. And I literally used all the money I'd saved up until that point to like buy it. And I said, I will study this on my own.
Huh. Okay, so then what happened next?
So, yeah, so that was 2020. Again, nothing really happened in terms of the business, even though I thought something was happening. Schooling was going a lot better because I felt I was also doing subjects because I changed my some of my modules from sociology to human anatomy and physiology, doing that with psychology. So I was just a lot more engaged in school as well. And I think just taking advantage of the online schooling system, like it wasn't as serious as the in-person version. So I just took advantage of that. Also just being at home and doing a lot of inner work. I did so much inner work in 2020. Because again, I just had all that free time. So I was constantly journaling, I was constantly meditating. I was also buying some other courses that were like, how to develop self-love or like how to heal from these kind of wounds. And I just threw myself into the deep end with that.
Wow. And how did you start learning about meditation and self-compassion and all these things?
Meditation had actually started, I would say, in my second final year of high school. Because for some reason, I was also questioning religion at the time. So I was looking at other religions, and Buddhism was one of the religions that really spoke to me in terms of just values, the way it was kind of organized. And having watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, I was like, oh yeah, Buddhism, it just makes sense. So that's how I first got exposed to meditation. And I tried meditating back in high school, but I'd always fall asleep during my meditations. But then in 2020, I just took it like really seriously, because that's also when I, again, just being so committed to kind of getting my life back in order, I also came across law of attraction and manifestation and a lot of those concepts. And again, also spirituality. So it was like, oh, if I, again, meditate, I do all these things, affirmations, whatever, I'll get what I want. So it wasn't coming from the best place, but it helped a lot. It was a good start. And that's why I was meditating. I was journaling my thoughts. I was actually starting to identify my beliefs, because it was like, just again, just understanding that thoughts attract like the things that you want. So it's like, okay, what thoughts are you thinking? And I'd literally just write down what I was thinking. I was like, oh, yeah, that's not a very empowering thought. We need to change that. So I was just spending a lot of time. And as I got deeper, there was also one creator I really resonated with. His name's Aaron Doughty. I really, really resonated with him, because I think that's when he started just teaching me more about, again, just the self-compassion and healing my own wounds and healing my trauma. And that's when I started also doing that inner work to just not get stuff, but also to heal myself, to be better for myself.
This is amazing that you did this all from like researching yourself.
Thank you. It was tough. It was also tough, but yeah, we made it work.
Yeah, because I've done a lot of this stuff, but I feel like there's been a lot of other people involved who have pointed me in that direction. I don't
But
know. I
that's
guess because
great.
when
That's
you're
also great.
yeah, well, because when you're depressed, it's hard to you can get very stuck in the.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like a bit above that, then you can start being like, okay, what's a like book that's gonna help, or like I'm gonna look at something on YouTube or whatever to find this stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think for me, just kind of like you're saying, just being above my like really low depressed state, at least I had a little bit of agency, so I didn't feel so helpless and hopeless that I couldn't do anything. There was just that little spark, like, okay, something can change, something better is out there. And it just felt like I just had to look for it. So I think that's why I also just got so into the if I do X, I'll get Y kind of mentality. And again, it's not the best model for doing anything, but it helps. It helps a lot depending where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you have tons of agency. That's what I just realized. It's like it doesn't sound like you were really a victim in this, in like all of it. Because I'm just thinking of probably what took me so long is like I was such a victim for so
Mm.
long that it was like, and even doing the inner work and then learning about the childhood stuff, and then it's like, oh, like it's my parents' fault or whoever, which then
Mm.
just keeps you stuck for ages. Did you
No,
ever
I agree. It's yeah. Again, I think just because unfortunately, I could have. I think just from a young age, I didn't like blaming my parents specifically with what was happening. I just took that, I internalized it and said, no, it's me. It's my fault. So again, if I want my mom's attention, I have to do something to get her attention. If I want my dad to, I don't know, just fetch me on the weekend, I have to make sure that I ask him, like, please fetch me this weekend. Don't send my uncle, don't send this, like, you please fetch me. And again, it's really interesting just from the perspective that I wasn't doing a lot of speaking up, but I think I always try to figure out some other way to try get what I wanted or accept what I had and then just move on, even though I hated whatever that situation was. So definitely just with later on in life, it was like just getting that little bit of hope that things can be a little bit better. I just like, if I want things to get better, I have to go find it. I have to go make it happen. And I hated that because, again, I would still look at other people and I was like, but why is it so easy for them? And maybe that's another thing that I kind of fell into unintentionally, but just thinking that things were so much harder for me, but not doing my best not to let that hold me back, even though it hurt, frankly, just to see how much easier things could be, but not for me. Like I'm just not one of those people who gets it easy.
Huh. But have you come out of that mindset now?
I've come out of the mindset that life is hard and that when you learn how to play with life, when you understand that everything in your life is literally just a reflection of you, yeah, it's removed a lot of that mentality that like life is hard or things are just harder for me. It's like, okay, I just have a different experience, I have different lessons, I have different tools to other people. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily harder. I probably just have to play by different rules. I probably have to break a few rules here, I have to bend a few rules here. But maybe that is what I actually need to get what I want. I need to get, I don't know, maybe the patience so that I can learn how to do this. I maybe need to learn how to be more disciplined than this person. I probably need to learn better communication skills than that person. And the only way I will get those skills and those lessons is by some of the challenges I've been given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and really it's like we have no idea from the outside like what anyone else's life really
Exactly,
looks
yeah. Exactly.
like. Okay, so then what was the rest of the pandemic like for you?
So the rest of the pandemic was really just, again, not doing actual business work, but doing, I guess, busy business work. It was finishing off that year of school. It was binging series with my family and especially my younger brother. And then going into 2021, just again excited for when the pandemic ended. When it did, I was again focused on like, okay, we're gonna make this year the best possible year we can. And that's when I really started focusing more on my business. I started actually reaching out to that long list of business owners that I had created. I got a few meetings, but I think because again, I didn't even have the skills in terms of like sales and positioning my offer and the transformation I would give them. I didn't sign a lot of them. So that like sucked, but it was also just valuable. Like I learned a lot in working on my business. And that was also in the year I really got into mindset. So that was like, okay, I'd done the inner work to heal my traumas and my pains and my wounds in 2020. 2021 felt like the year to really start tackling what's holding me back from moving forward. And for me, a lot of that just came down to my beliefs and my mindset. That's also when I met and actually invested in a proper course this time with John Gab and Vash Tomanek. And yeah, so they were like my first proper mentors and coaches. And I was working with them to like, yeah, just really on my mindset and actually building my business without focusing so much on the tactics and the strategies, but just focusing on me and being the person who can achieve those goals.
And how did it go?
It went really well. So a lot of 2021, because I joined them, I think in August of 2021. I was again still doing school, so school was going good from that perspective. Family and friends were also good. I was going to the gym consistently. But in terms of the business, again, I was just struggling because I think as I was working with them, so much came up, not even just from my beliefs, but I think how I saw myself. And I really struggled with a lot of those fears. I struggled with a lot of the doubts. And I struggled with even showing up sometimes to some of the calls because it was a group coaching structure. So I struggled even just with showing up to the calls. So it was a lot of hiding and trying to figure out things on my own instead of actually asking for the help that I've invested in. Again, I was still doing some outreach. I was getting some calls here and there, but I wasn't able to sign any of them. Then into 2022, that's when I really started showing up to the calls and I said, okay, I'm struggling with this. I don't know how to approach this. I don't know how to position this. And it was just amazing because I feel as I opened myself up to my coaches, like it felt like the world just opened up to me as well. And that's when I really started seeing like a lot of the inner work also paying off, shifting my beliefs, shifting my identity, starting to pay off. I signed one client, and that was amazing. It was like so crazy because I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Um, it was also the year I really pushed my work ethic because now it was the final year of uni. I was really committed to getting that first client. So I pushed and I pushed. And again, just like seeing myself being like, I was also doing kickboxing at the time. So I was balancing just school. I was balancing a sport. I was balancing my business, also my friends, because that was the time when I felt most confident in my relationships with other people. So I was balancing all of that and seeing the way I was actually able to do it. I was just really impressed with myself. But it was also the year I realized that a marketing agency isn't what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that was hard to reconcile.
Were you back in Cape Town at that point?
Yeah, I was back in Cape Town.
And had you healed from the breakup by this point?
Yeah, pretty much. I think I wasn't actively dating, but I was definitely meeting new people. I was contemplating like dating. I was contemplating possibly being in a relationship, but I knew I was like, okay, no, not just yet. I feel there's still some work I want to do on myself. Um, I also feel like that's when I showed up a lot better because my ex and I were still friends. I think that's when I also showed up a lot better and more honestly with them and saying like just being a genuine friend, not being someone who was being a friend with the intention of hopefully getting them back in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then what happened after so you finished uni that year and
Yeah,
decided marketing wasn't for you?
yeah. So yeah, recognize that okay, I really didn't see myself doing this for the rest of my life, or even just like the next 5 years, really. And that was hard because I think the sunk cost bias was just it was just beating my ass, frankly. Because I was like, but you've invested so much time, you did like what else are you gonna do? Are you really gonna? Because I think also at this point I realized like I don't want a traditional career. So it was a lot of things just from a career perspective coming at me like, okay, I don't want to run a marketing agency, but I also don't want a traditional career, even as a psychologist. So I was like, oh my God, what the hell am I gonna do? And I think especially just the traditional career I was struggling a lot with because I didn't know how to tell my parents in the sense of like, I don't want a traditional job. And I think especially just in terms of employment, um, people are very iffy, I feel, about it. They want to see you working, they want to see you in a traditional job. And not a lot of people are open to entrepreneurship. And especially in South Africa where the employment rate is just unemployment rate is just terrible. My parents weren't even comfortable with me like this year saying I'm gonna take this year to figure it out. They weren't like super comfortable with that. I told them like I'm gonna be working on building my personal brand. I'll see what my personal brand grows into. They supported me, but they were a little bit nervous, to say
Huh.
the least. Yeah.
So did you feel like you were getting a lot of pressure to get a job after uni?
Yeah. Either to get a job after uni or to get into a postgraduate program. And that's the reason why I ended up getting 2023. It became an impromptu gap year just because I didn't get into post grad. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to get a job, but I want to do something that at least aligns with what I'm thinking of. So in probably either in early 2023 or end of 2022, I literally just feel like I got this download to start a coaching business. I literally just like I just saw myself like having this coaching business and helping people, and I was like, that makes sense. Because again, I'd still be doing psychology just in a different way, but actually maybe in a way that aligns with me more. I would still have a business, which again leads into me being in control of my finances, being my own boss, being free in terms of like work. And again, just like it had all the elements I was looking for. And trying to figure that out, it was like, okay, cool. And then somehow I stumbled across Twitter and people were like, start building a personal brand on Twitter. It's really beneficial. And I was like, okay. I literally just went with that. I started writing as well. And it's just been such a crazy ride. Like 2023 was such an expansive year for me. I freaking loved it, like in all areas, truly.
And it's been going well.
Yeah, it's been going well. I mean, I've been speaking to people, also just understanding their problems more. And just each day, like even yesterday, I remember I was speaking to someone and was like, I can genuinely help this person. And that's when I knew that this is what I should be doing. Because compared to the marketing agency, I was always doubtful. I was like, I don't know if I can help you. I don't know how to run ads. I'm literally studying them as I'm trying to build them for you. And I didn't feel confident in, excuse me, in just speaking to people and saying like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this for you. But now with coaching, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna help you. You know, whatever it takes, I'm gonna help you and I want to help you. And it's just been so fun. I even just writing, because I've been writing, like I started a blog, but now I'm switching it to a newsletter because the blog felt oddly restrictive. Because I was writing on Medium, and I think in my head I just had some kind of idea that this is how I must write because it's on this platform. But now I feel like switching to a newsletter where it just feels so much more freeing. Like I can post as much as I want. I can write in the style that I want. I feel like I'm speaking more directly to my audience. And yeah, it's just been going really good and I'm having fun. And I think that's something I've also been playing with, like this idea of work being fun, not something hard or draining or, you know, like just dragging, like, oh my God, I have to go to work. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I get to work today.
Amazing. That's great. That's my theme for 2024, the year of fun. Because I'm the
I love that. Please make it the year of fun.
yeah. Um, what are you going to use for your newsletter? I saw your blog, by the way. I was like, wow, you're doing a lot. You're really good at writing. But I was thinking, because I write a newsletter, and I was like, I'm thinking of switching to Substack. So, because then I feel like it is
Mm.
both like a blog and a newsletter. I don't know.
Yeah, that's also what I'm thinking. I'm using Beehive, so I'm also thinking of like using the newsletter and also having it as a blog because I think this was something I struggled with because towards the end of last year, I saw a lot more content about people saying like build your email list, even if you don't have a big audience, like just build it. And I was like, okay, makes sense why I should. But then I was struggling to say like, so the blog post, do I just send as newsletters or like what happen or do I need to like change the blog before I send it as a newsletter or what happens? But now I feel that if I literally just write a newsletter, create almost like the back end where it also pops up as a blog, it's like, well, that's killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm the same. I love how it's like you're connecting with your audience, like you
Yeah.
writing to them. It's like a letter.
Hmm.
Um, that's great. So what's your kind of vision for 2024 or for the next couple of years?
My vision for 2024 is really just to, I would also say to have fun, but it's also just a year of work and transformation because I feel that I've gotten so much clarity that now it's like all I just need to do is put my head down and just take one step after the next, after the next, after the next, and just keep going. And then maybe, I don't know, like in a year or 2 years, I can pop up and be like, oh my gosh, this is like what I've done. But also just experiencing more joy. A big, um, actually, I mean, repeatedly, but a big transformation I had, I would say now in December was I really just want to experience a lot more joy in my life, whether that is from work, whether it's from my relationships, my health. I want to experience joy. And the last thing I want to do is do work and hate it because then I'm not going to make it work. But if I can feel joy in it, I mean, I could work for hours and it won't even feel like hours. So definitely just helping as many people as I can, just in terms of mastering their mindset, because I've just realized like it's not just mindset, not even just their mindset, like just their internal world. I've realized this over the years that it's more than mindset and it's more than just inner work. You kind of need to combine them both. And then if you really just want to live your best life, you need to also understand like reality creation and how reality works. And I think when you have those elements together, like you're literally unstoppable.
Amazing. And do you feel like there's anything that's still holding you back?
Right now, I think it's just about holding the faith that things will work out. Um, yeah, so because there's times when like doubt comes up and it's like, okay, yeah, it might not work out. But what if it does? And learning to always just shift my focus back to that, saying like, what if it does? Okay, I don't know that yet, but can I figure it out? Okay, then that's the next step that we do. And literally just holding myself every step of the way and saying like, you will figure it out. It will work out. And just keep moving as best as I can.
Amazing. Such a good attitude. And because, yeah, when stuff doesn't like quote unquote work out, you still learn from it. Like that marketing thing, it's like you're a student anyway at that time. It's not like you lost, it's not like you were like 40 and had some career and then stepped
Yeah.
away from it. But even if you had done that, like you would have still taken the learning and whatever. But
Yeah,
that's why I
no,
think it's
I agree because I think even moving into like the coaching business this year, it was like, okay, there's new skills I definitely need to learn, like writing and just whatever else was going to come up. But the fact that I knew how to sell better, I knew how to communicate with people better and do market research, it helped me so much. So I was like, yeah, my first business failed, but that's a great thing because now moving into my second business, I have a better foundation in building it. And yeah, I'm just really excited for what this year could be.
that's great. Okay, last quick 3 questions before we wrap up.
Okay.
Unless there's anything else you want to add.
Um, I do want to add, I listened to it like at first when you had contacted me, and then I listened to it again, I think earlier this week, your first episode. And I think the one thing I loved about your first episode was just how excited you were for this podcast. And I'm really excited to see where your podcast goes just this year and like the years to come. Like, because you were so excited and you were just like expressing, like, this is what I want to do. And I feel so clear about it. Okay, I'm not making sense, but this is what I want to do. And you just like, I just loved how excited you sounded. And I listened to like other episodes after that, and I'm just so excited to see where your podcast goes.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
So yeah, I just wanted to add that because it's like I'm so excited. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you. Okay. How do you stay grounded?
Meditation and reminding myself of who I want to become and how far I've come.
And do you like write that down or how do you remind yourself?
So I remind myself by having a vision of who I want to become, and then I have a list of past successes of like you've overcome this, and just looking over that time to time, like oh my god, you've actually come very far. Because I think we tend to forget how far we've come because maybe we judge ourselves by where we want to go or just on a mistake we made, and it's like yeah, you're gonna make mistakes. You made that mistake, but you recovered really well. So give yourself a little bit more credit. You're doing great.
Huh. Maybe that's something I should do. Yeah, I feel like that helps so much with resilience. when it's
Mm,
like, yeah, I've done hard things before. I can overcome this,
exactly.
thing that comes my way. Um, okay. Is there a book? Well, you already mentioned a couple, but is there one book that stands out as having the biggest impact on you?
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I reread it this December, and yeah, that book is just a gold mine for really starting to understand that like the world and the reality you want to create starts with you. And Dr. Joe Dispenza really beautifully explains how you can do that. I think whether you are someone who's really pragmatic or someone who is spiritual, I think he just balances this way of speaking to both people and helping you understand that you can literally create any reality you want by starting with you.
Cool. Maybe I'll check it out. I know a
Definitely
lot of
check it
people
out.
really love him. I just got someone I know went to one of his retreat things and they were like, this is like a cult. They were like, this is like really bad vibes. So now I'm like
Oh,
really wary of it. But I mean, I guess it can be a cult and he can still have like good wisdom and
yeah, there's always that. There's good cults. There's good cults.
um okay, I'll check it out. And then last question, what 3 words describe the best version of you?
Joyful, abundant, and badass.
Love it. Oh yeah, and then where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter would be the best place, just because again, like I said, I'm moving from Medium to a newsletter, which will be hopefully launching next week. So I would say Twitter would be the best place to find me.
How do you pronounce your surname, by the way?
Mdluli.
Mdluli.
Yeah.
Nice.
So Shana, yes, Shana Mdluli, and then on X or Twitter, I'm at Thrive Minds One.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Shana.
No, thank you so much, Delia. It was such a great conversation. I had a really great time.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, feel free to share it with someone. And also, a random 23-year-old just messaged me on Instagram and told me he found the podcast through the algorithm. So it actually does help if you review the podcast and subscribe or follow. And then you get to find out about future episodes as well.